Okay, well, hello again, and welcome to the Office of Professional Services and Human Capital Categories Industry Partnership and Community of Interest webinar series. Again, my name is Arlinda Halliburton, and I'm hosting today's session. And for those of you who've been with us before, you know that these industry-focused webinars are designed to answer your questions about professional services acquisitions and to provide information to help you enhance your business opportunities and successfully manage your GSA schedules contract. Before we begin today's session, I just want to go over a couple of quick housekeeping rules. First, please make sure to mute your phone during the presentation. Secondly, you can ask your questions in real time. However, our presenter may choose to answer questions at the end of the presentation. Any questions we aren't able to cover will be answered and emailed out to all participants. Secondly, you should have received a copy of today's presentation just prior to the meeting, but on the off chance that you did not, you will be able to download it yourself from the chat box. Okay, well now I have the pleasure of presenting our speaker for today, Mr. Mike Rice. Mike is a certified business development expert, and he currently teaches, currently he is teaching a class at George Mason University's Schar School of Business. It's a certification course in business development, and he's going to be sharing some of those tips with us on how to actually go after, how to actually respond to RFIs, RFQs to win. And let's see, I think that is all. I'll let Mike, I'm going to give Mike the mic so that he can go into more detail about his history. But basically, I'd also like to say Mike actually has experience on both sides. He worked internally at GSA for a number of years and actually designed acquisition vehicles. So he knows now both sides of the operation. So on that, Mike, I'm passing the mic to you.
Thank you. Arlinda knows, don't give Mike the mic. He doesn't typically give it back. So no, that's just the teacher in me. And again, folks, I want to thank you for asking me to come back and speak. I'm going to do a little bit better this time. Instead of 30 slides, I've got 15. Go figure. But we're going to do a very focused topic. And what we're going to look at, and again, just to reiterate, we do a set of courses at Schar School of Policy and Government through George Mason University. And this is a small piece of what we teach. Quickly, the other instructors that I work with through Parker Group Academy is Gloria Parker, who is also online today. She teaches the business development, and she actually teaches the customer engagement piece, which is fascinating. Thomas Boyce, he teaches our service delivery piece. He's also online today. And William Randolph, he's the former SCS. He is a contracting officer. He teaches all the time. In fact, he's on his feet today teaching, working with contracting officers within the federal government, teaching them how acquisition works. What William gives us gives us a little bit of a sneak preview of what's going on in the background. So what I'm going to do today is we're going to talk about, my goal is to talk about solicitation documents, okay? And these are things that I wish we were taught when we first started out in business development. And where does all this fit inside the business development lifecycle? Where does it fit within the acquisition lifecycle? I've got some slides to put together. And really, folks, it really does make sense when you figure these things out. And it does change how you respond to these specific documents. Typically, you begin to engage with the documents in the capture phase of the lifecycle. Again, we're going to express this lifecycle a little bit differently later because I want you to see where it fits in the big picture. But typically, the life cycle's got an identify phase, a qualify phase, where you're identifying opportunities, you're developing opportunities, and we can talk about that later. You're qualifying. You're going to hear me say all the time, qualify, qualify, qualify. Anything could happen, anything could change within that particular acquisition, which changes its qualifying factor, okay? So we qualify hard. And the real goal for small businesses in general, but even large businesses do the same thing, is to keep a nice, trim, healthy pipeline. of opportunities that you're going after. Small businesses have a tendency to fall into this trap of, we can do the work. Okay, yep, you can do the work, but can you win the work? And that's really what we're trying to identify. To get out of the identify, qualify phase, we've got to be able to answer that question, can I win? Then we move into capture. Capture is when you're designing your offer design. You're beginning to do a little bit more of a deep dive with your basically it's a competitive landscape. So you're doing more of a deep dive there. And then we move into proposal, where you do proposal development, and then post-proposal and post-award. And those are typical notional phases within a healthy business development life cycle. Once you're inside the capture activities, the very first thing you do is you move into this concept of being able to evaluate solicitation. And the solicitation is going to come in phases. We're going to take a look at that. And the type of solicitation documents are going to dictate how you're going to respond. This is actually aligned with my book. So the slides are a little bit out of line in procedure, but aligned with the book right now. And we'll make those adjustments later. Okay. When we talk about taking a look at your solicitation documents, and we just mind your P's and Q's. When we were growing up, that was a phrase that I grew up with: mind your P's and Q's, mind your manners. The idea is we're talking about the difference between an RFQ and an RFP. And I don't know if anybody ever explained that to you, but if you take a look at the documents themselves, the RFQ is it's got general instructions. It's very tactical in nature. Okay. When I say tactical, typically within an RFQ, it's got very well-defined requirements. The government knows exactly what they've got. And typically what they're looking for is they're looking for your management approach, your key personnel, and your pricing. And when I say tactical, it's about executing what we have here, okay? When you get into an RFP, you've got a little bit more latitude. It's strategic and tactical in nature. So the idea is to get you to give us a little bit of your strategy, and then tactically how you're going to accomplish it. And the customer here is typically looking for a full offer design to include your technical approach and your management approach. So really think about it this way: RFQ, very well-defined requirements. RFP, I am going to give you a little bit of latitude. I want you to be creative. I want to see what your approach is going to be. Okay, so this is important, and I can share reflections. GSA just had and I'm not going to tell which acquisition it was, but the acquisition went out, and the GSA released a very specific RFQ with very specific instructions with the statement of work. And many of the vendors came back with their own business processes, their own approaches, and basically were disqualified. They didn't see what the government's basically saying: we know our business. This is what we need you to do. And so they released it with an RFQ and a statement of work, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Okay, so there is a difference between the two documents. And whenever you see something like that, you right away, when you offer design, you need, in RFQ, you need less of a solutions architect. RFP, you're going to need more of a solutions architect because they're looking for something that's a little bit more creative. Okay, so I told you I want to show you this life cycle in another format. Okay, and so in business development, in the life cycle, we see the identify, qualify, capture, proposal, post-proposal, post-award. Okay, and then we have this whole nother section called service delivery. And it needs to be in there because this is a big part of business development. In the very first phases of the business development, you are in the identify and qualify phase, okay? And typically these are your business development professionals, okay? This is your BDers that are out, okay? If you notice here on the demand line, we're in a discovery mode. So the customer's discovering you, you're discovering the customer, you're learning about what their problems they're up against, you're trying to develop solutions for them. In the business development world, we use this phrase called demand gen or demand generation. These are opportunities, and we actually teach about this opportunities to actually create demand with your customer, okay? And again, the real key is, are you solving a problem? And so that's what we talk about, demand generation. But really, in this particular phase, in business development, you're in that discovery mode, okay? By the time you get into capture and proposal, you should be based on knowledge. If you're going into your capture and you really don't have any intimacy with the customer, you don't know nothing about their mission, you don't know nothing about the incumbency, whatnot, you don't have the knowledge to move forward. Okay, you should have caught all that in the identify and qualify phase. Okay, this is at the point you are in pursuit. Okay, so you're in capture and you're in proposal mode, and it's always based on knowledge. The next phase is your post-proposal and post-award. Now, this should be based on your preparation. You're expecting something. You're expecting an award, or you're expecting not to be the successful awardee, but you're in expectation mode. Okay, this is where you're going to be working on your transition plans and your due diligence for transition, and starting to align what that organization is going to look like going in. And then obviously you have your post-award. Okay, and let me just throw something at you real quick. One of the things that we're real strong in teaching is if you win the deal, get a debrief, ask for a debrief out the gate. Okay, look, we live in a world of retrospective. Okay, and in that world of retrospective, we are always going back and taking a look at how could we have done this capture better. Okay, everybody thinks about getting a debrief when you lose. Well, that's a good idea too. Okay, and there's a way of asking for that debrief. And so what we want to do is we always want to do better. And one of the things we try to push is continuous capture improvement. And the only way you're going to get this is in your post-award activities. Going back, taking a look, what did we do good? What didn't we do well? Did we have the right capture team? Were our graphics the way they needed to be? Did our graphics support our narrative? Did our proof points support our past performance, corporate experience, and our narrative? So these are things that you really take that time to get retrospective. And what it does is it lets you do it better the next time. Okay. And again, really, what's the goal of a debrief? To learn how I could do better. What's wrong with getting that same debrief, even if you win? Because you're gonna do better the next time. And that's really what the things we're trying to push. And then obviously, if you've been awarded, you're in service delivery. Okay, if you look at the demand line, you're in demand fulfillment. Okay. Now I'm going to go a little bit farther. We're going to take a look at this, and this is going to be interesting, and I hope this makes sense to you. Okay. Here's a notional federal acquisition lifecycle. Okay. And I try to be really cute and color code this thing. But you have your contract planning phases. Okay. Where you're doing requirements and funding. Looking for funding, you're doing your market research, and that's very important when we look at the documents. Market intelligence. Intelligence and research are two different things, okay? They're satisfied sometimes with the same documents, but the idea is there's market research, that is what's available out there, and market intelligence is what are the characteristics around that offering. And we can talk about that in a little bit. Planning for your contract type, getting all your approvals, okay? So there is in our identify phase. I aligned it with business development in the identify side. Then we get into solicitation. Okay, solicitation, the announcement. You engage with the industry. This is the government. They develop the solicitation itself. A lot of times you'll see an RFI come out here. Okay, and in the RFI, what they'll do is they will attach a draft RFP or a draft PWS and ask for suggestions and clarifying questions and whatnot. So that's still part of the market research phase. But they're trying to really nail down what that solicitation is going to look like. They issue a solicitation, and then you've got your question and answer time and your mods. Now we're moving into the capture mode. And you notice this life cycle itself stops. Okay, it's not doing anything during this period of time. And again, knowing that you're not going to get any more knowledge, there's no more way going back and getting any more information as far as that opportunity is concerned. So you're really in that capture, and that's why I'm a real proponent of you're standing on knowledge. You're in pursuit. You've got knowledge. And if you did everything right and you're identifying your qualified phase, if your business developers did everything right as far as establishing the relationship, understanding what the problem is and solving problems, you're going to move on a solid foundation of knowledge. Then we move into we submit our proposal, and then the acquisition life cycle picks up again. This is where they're going to evaluate the volumes. They may come back and ask for clarification, or we used to call them BAFOs, but they're FPRs now. Let me just say this: if the government comes back for clarification questions or an FPR, which is final proposal revision, I think is what it is, that's a good sign. That means they're taking your offer design seriously. And so always be responsive when you get these opportunities. They'll evaluate the final and then select their awardee. Okay, at that point in time, we're in post-proposal. They make the award, and we move into what's called post-award. In the contract, in the federal acquisition lifecycle, they're making the contract award. They're notifying the unsuccessful awardees. They are doing their debriefs. They're managing protests. If there's going to be a protest, they obligate the funds. And that's an important process once the funds are obligated. And then they move into post-award activities, which is the service delivery as far as we're concerned. They commence with performance. They place orders against whether it's a BPA, IDIQ, whatever their vehicle is. They monitor performance. They update the CPARs. And there's always this process at the very end of closing out that contract. Okay. Now, I want you to see something here, and this is interesting. I don't know if you guys have ever had the situation where the contracting officer got upset when you asked for an extension. Okay. There's a thing that came out in 2020. It's called PALT. It's an OFPP document right out of the White House, and it's called Procurement Acquisition Lead Time. And just to give you a little bit of background on what their world looks like, a contracting officer is going to be basically judged on PALT, the time the solicitation is released to the time the contract is awarded. Okay, they're very time sensitive. They've got other work that they have to take care of, and so once they establish what that PALT period of time is, they work really, really hard to stay inside of that. And that, again, that is where they get judged, get their scorecards done. Okay, where then is your opportunity? Your opportunity is right at the very beginning during contract planning, and I put opportunity over the post-award side because this is when part of our course, and I'm going to chase a rabbit real quick, is look, business development has got three legs, three pursuit types. Okay, the first one is the obvious one, new business. Okay, I'm going after new business. Okay, the second one is extend and expand, or we call it organic growth within the program. Well, there you see your first level of opportunity. Okay, and really the third one are your recompetes. I worked for a company once before where if I lost a recompete, I lost my job. We did not lose our recompetes, and that's the way it worked. That meant me as a business developer had to be engaged with my customer with that contract at all times. Okay, so I could stay on top of it. So here at Service Delivery are two opportunities out of three in business development. So new pursuits, that makes perfect sense. I'm going after new stuff. That's where my business development needs to be really, really good up on the upfront. Okay, organic growth and your recompetes. Now, we say this all the time. You can win or lose your recompete during transition. So transition is very important. And there's some of the things we try to teach is how to write a good transition plan and what the government's look at. That's your risk mitigation plan to the government for exchanging the contract. So, all right. So I hope what I'm hoping here is that this looks good to you, makes sense to you. See where business development aligns with federal acquisition and where why the contracting officers operate within certain parameters where they're at, and then where your opportunities are within the life cycle. Okay, so that's important. And all these documents now we start getting into. Now I started with the RFP and the RFQ. Okay, so I kind of got a little ahead of myself. So what we really want to do is we want to talk about those research documents. Okay, and the first one we're going to talk about is the RFI. Okay, and the purpose for the RFI is to inform. Okay. When I talk about inform, it looks for challenges and knowledge gaps. Okay. What William likes to talk about, when they're taking a look at here's what we want to be able to accomplish, it's Swiss cheese. Okay. We got holes and we got to find a way to fill those holes. And what the RFI does, the RFI goes out and says, okay, inform me of what's in the market. Inform me of, and in front of you responding to RFIs, there's some very basic questions in the RFIs. Okay. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to get information on who can satisfy this requirement. All right. When I talk about it's market intelligence versus market research. All right. Difference between research and intelligence would say, and again, I'm going to have to pick on William, use one of his examples here, which is really good. All right. I don't know, maybe have a Krispy Kreme around you. Okay. Well, I have a Krispy Kreme just 2 miles up the road from me. All right. Now, we know Krispy Kreme makes those wonderful light donuts. I could take 12 of them, squish them together, and eat them all by themselves. But Krispy Kreme, we know that that's where they provide donuts. Okay. Now, market intelligence would tell you a couple of things. When that red light is on, guess what? Those donuts are warm. They just came right out of the oven. So there's something there that go, oh, here's a little bit more intelligence than just getting a donut. Market intelligence might tell you things like, okay, I need 13 donuts. Well, they sell in dozens and I get 30 cents a donut in a dozen, but if I buy it by itself, it's 68 cents. I'm making up those numbers. But that's what market intelligence does. How does that particular product or service, how is it packaged? So those are the things they're trying to figure out. They may say, look, I only need 9, but guess what? If I buy 9 individually, it's going to cost me more than if I buy a dozen. That's what market intelligence tells you. So that's what your contracting officers, and that when they're actually taking a look at the market research side, they're looking for research, who can, inform me of who can, and then intelligence, and what does it look like? So I can actually package up the solicitation better. Okay. Now we move into source of sought notifications. Source of sought notifications, okay, RFIs inform, source of sought and identify. So the idea is that I've got my requirements and I'm going to go out and I'm going to solicit interested parties. I'm looking at the market capacity at this point in time. Who can step up? Some of the things that drive this, if you ever noticed when you did some responses, they would ask RFI or source of sought, they ask you what government vehicles you've got. Hey, that's intelligence, right? I've got a small businesses sitting out here, and some of them are stars 3, some of them are 8A, some of them are woman-owned. Whatever the classification is, we get that back, okay? Once the key thing is find out what vehicles that you're on that I can actually release this thing through, okay? So when they ask you those questions, they're trying to get some intelligence on who can provide, okay? So identifies who can provide. Again, it's a capacity tool. They have certain requirements they have to hit before they release a particular solicitation, especially in the day of small business. Okay, they need to look at that market first. And they do this when the market surety now, the information was happening in the market is high. Okay, so those are the differences between your RFI and your source of sought. I'm gonna say this, and this is not to offend anybody, okay, who's on here. Sometimes even some contract folks, 1102s, don't quite understand the difference between the two. Okay, so it's a good idea to understand what these documents are designed for, and what is it trying to satisfy. Okay, now I'm going to get to another step up, and we talked about the RFQ and the RFP. Remember, we talked about the RFQ as being most restrictive. Okay, when I have a RFQ, what is it asking me for? Request for quote. I see that word is looking for a quote. They pretty much know exactly what they're looking for. Okay, RFP would be a little less restrictive. Okay, as far as my response is concerned, and we see that they're going to use one of 3 types of solicitation documents or requirements documents. The first one would be a statement of work, and this is pretty much the best example somebody ever gave me of what the difference of these documents are. So a statement of work will be paint by the numbers. Okay, so here's your picture out there. You've got your oils. I remember my dad doing a beautiful picture when I was little, and he painted it. I said, I never knew my dad could do that kind of stuff. And he set it up for the night to dry, and we got up the next morning and all run down. So he ruined it. But the idea here is that what you're going to be judged on, painting by the numbers, did I pick the right color? Did I stay within the lines? Okay, it's very strict in your response. So when you have a statement of work, pay very, very close attention. One thing that's offensive to a line of business, okay, is that when you're not paying attention, that I told you exactly what I wanted, and you didn't pay attention, you didn't listen, and you went off in your own way. You're gone. It's that simple. Got to pay attention to the document type. Typically, you're going to see a statement of work within an RFQ structure as far as solicitation is concerned. The next one is a PWS, performance work statement. Now, here I said paint this tree in a statement of work. Now, a PWS will say, okay, I'm going to give you some boundaries. Paint me a green tree. Okay. So I've got an object, okay, and then what they're looking at is what green tree did they like most. Okay, so there's certain requirements. The tree had to be so tall, it had to be the color green. And then what they do is they can be a little subjective and say, I really like their technical approach here, okay? So a PWS is going to give you a little bit more of that flexibility, a little bit more creativity. It can fall under an RFQ or an RFP, but typically it's one that gives you a little bit more latitude. Okay, and if you even take a look at how these things are put together, they'll basically direct you to begin to build out your technical approach. We want to hear your technical approach. And finally, statement of objectives. I put down this is the RFP's Wild Wild West. Okay, paint any tree. Okay, I have a business issue. I didn't even know how to begin to solve it. Start to solve this. You get a lot of flexibility, a lot of latitude. I've actually worked on a couple of sues. The government did evaluate based on the approach, how it aligned with their enterprise, how it aligned with their line of business. And we did very, very well with it. And we had very creative people. We put a good one together. So anyway, so there's your differences. There's your requirements documents. So what have we talked about so far? We've talked about RFP versus RFQ. We've talked about RFI versus your sources sought notifications. And now we looked at the requirements documents, and they all have their place. And this one picture right here will kind of give you an idea of how you might, at the very beginning, approach a solicitation based on the type of requirements that they had out there. Okay, let's move a little bit forward. Remember this picture? We talked about this picture. All right. I want to talk about this section right here, and that is when take a look at the federal acquisition lifecycle. And let me show you where all these documents will fit, okay, within the acquisition lifecycle. Here we have a typical marketing funnel, okay, and I'm going to call this the acquisition funnel, okay. Now, once you remember those little squares, okay, you have memorized. There's going to be a quiz after this, okay. So here we go. First, contract planning, okay. In contract planning, I'm doing my requirements, funding, market research, planning, contract type approval, and whatnot. I'm going to use my RFIs and my sources sought. Just because you get one doesn't mean you're not going to get the other. Okay, so RFI would be a little bit more broad. Sources sought is bringing that funnel down just a little bit closer. Okay, next one. Here's our solicitation. The announce, the engaged industry, develop solicitation, issue the solicitation, Q&A, and mods. Okay, that's in the RFP, RFQ model. Okay. Then we move down to source selection. There's your evaluation, okay? So we evaluate the models, we do our clarifications, we do our final proposal revisions, we do update to the final, okay? That's a whole 3-hour discussion in and of itself. We select our awards, okay? Watch this. Here's our contract award. We award the contract, we notify the unsuccessful, we now setting up our debriefs. We're dealing with protests if we need to deal with protests, and we're obligating funds at this point in time. Watch this. Now we're in post-award. We're commencing with performance, we're placing orders, we're monitoring the performance, we're doing our CPARs, and ultimately at the end of that contract, we're going to close it out. Okay? All right, so those are your documents. That's minding your P's and Q's. And I got a couple more slides, and then we'll open up for questions, okay? Things just to take in consideration. Everybody goes, okay, Mike, you kind of explained that. I kind of see how it works. Okay, but we're working with the government, and we're dealing with the FAR and the supplements, agency supplements. All right, this is important. Okay, and I think this is where a lot of people get hung up a little bit. All right, so we have so we have the Federal Acquisition Regulation, FAR. Let's just talk there first. What is it designed to do? It's designed to establish uniform policies and procedures. Agencies are encouraged to do their supplements. The folks at acquisition.gov has got a list of all the agency supplements. They're important. I had a question a while ago, and I really didn't know how to answer it. What takes precedence, the FAR, the supplements? And I was basically told that the supplements can overwrite the FAR. Okay, because the supplements are supplements, they are regulations. So we'll talk about that in a second. It defines the acquisition boundaries. Okay, but at the same time, guys, the FAR gives you tremendous latitude. Gives the contracting officer tremendous latitude. I would encourage you. I think when I was here last time speaking, I was encouraging everybody, if you get the opportunity, see if you can sign up for DHS's PIL. Okay, that's the Procurement Innovation Lab. You will learn so much about what you can do. All right, so we'll come back to that in a second. Okay, let me say one more thing before we move on to that. The FAR, look, 50% of the FAR is really what you can do and what you no, wait a minute, I'm gonna say this the right way. 25% is what you can't do. Okay. 25% is what you have to do. The other 50% is wide open. Okay, so there is latitude inside there. I typically say 50% of it is restrictive, the other 50% is not restrictive. But really, 25 what you can do, 25 what you have to do. Okay, what you can't do, what you have to do, and then the other 50% is where the latitude comes in. There is tremendous latitude within the FAR to do some creative stuff. And contracting officers are learning. These are some of the things that William teaches. These are some things that the PIL teaches. Is how to be creative within the solicitations, and we're going to look at something in a second. All right. I would encourage you to get those 4 Mythbusters from OFPP. Okay. Understand that OFPP is encouraging 1102 community to interact with industry. They need to be working together to solve problems. Okay. So we're not trying to sell a widget here or a widget there. We're trying to solve a problem, and that's only going to happen when industry and contracting people, program people are working together and discussing. And OFPP is encouraging that with the 4 Mythbusters. Okay. Now, I gave you this dot that we got U.S. Constitution, we got U.S. Code sitting up there, we got regulation, we have policy, we have procedures. Where does the FAR fit in this? Right here. Okay. Gloria teaches the class, and the first thing comes out of her mouth, she goes, the FAR is not law. The FAR is regulation. Okay. And if you understand how this works, how this funnel works, or this pyramid works, look at this. Okay. The Constitution establishes code establishes law establishes a regulation will establish policies will establish procedures. Well, what's the procedure for? To comply with the policy. What's the policy for? To comply with the regulation. What's the regulation for? To comply with the U.S. Code. And what's the U.S. Code for? To comply with the Constitution. That's where it fits. Okay. Where it really comes together and works is when we finally do this. We put standards. We put everything on top of standards. Standards remove surprises. Okay. Standard operating procedures. Okay. We write the standing operating procedures to support the policies. Okay. This is why we have National Institute of Standards and Technology. Sorry, back in my day, it was called something else. That's why we have these standards organizations, okay? Because what they do is they remove surprises. They remove surprises in our daily procedures and how we satisfy policy and in turn satisfy regulation. All this conversation is basically to say, folks, this is where the FAR sits. It sits underneath the code, okay, and on top of policy. So the FAR should drive policy, but the FAR is not law, okay? So as long as we get that, we're doing pretty good. Also, too, this is something. That's just a rabbit that jumped up. I'm just kind of encourage you with this rabbit. If you're planning on doing an unsolicited proposal, and that's a whole art in and of itself, make sure you get the agency supplement document. Okay, because most of the time, how to submit. Now, FAR will touch on how to submit unsolicited proposals, but if you're submitting to a specific agency, okay, it's a good idea to get a hold of their agency document and go through their agency document, because specifics in how to submit unsolicited proposal is there. Okay. Now, in the acquisition world, I just want to let you guys know there are certain laws, and you need to understand these laws. Okay. We've kind of run into these things a couple of times, but there's a thing called the purpose statute. Okay. And I don't know if you have ever heard of that before, but the idea is required funds. Hold on, folks. My computer's being wiki-wacky here. I'm still online? Yes, I'm still online. Okay, so purpose statute says required funds are only used for the purpose and programs for which the appropriation was made. Okay, so the idea is that U.S. Code Section 1301 basically says that my funds can only go for the purpose of that particular solicitation, a particular appropriation. I can only satisfy what the appropriation was for. Bona fide need rule is another one, which is law, and I'm reading this right now. Bona fide need rule is one of those fundamental principles of appropriation law. Fiscal year appropriation may be obligated only to meet legitimate or bona fide needs arising in, or in some other cases arising prior, but continuing to exist in the fiscal year. Okay, all that says is that if I have funds for a particular solicitation, it needs to be spent within that fiscal year. Now, if I make the award at the end of a fiscal year, it can go on to the next year. But the idea is making sure that we're managing funds appropriately. Then we have this thing called the Anti-Deficiency Act. Okay, Anti-Deficiency Act is something that's can be tricky. Okay, and we have to be real careful about that. And basically, the idea is under anti-deficiency, the government cannot spend money they don't have. okay? And at the same time, you got to make sure that you got to watch out for the gifts and things like that. Okay, there's rules and regulations around that. The only story I can really tell you about that one was about a military individual who was going from one meeting to another meeting, and he caught a ride with the contractor to get to the next meeting, and he got in trouble for riding with the contractor. Okay, so that kind of gives you an idea how you have to really be careful when you're dealing with federal government. That's law. Okay, that's not in the FAR. That's law. What is in the FAR are things like this. Uniform contract format. Okay, we've all dealt with uniform contract format. Okay, we joke about this all the time. Okay, so when a solicitation comes out, first thing the proposal manager does is he jumps to Section L and Section L. Well, actually, they go to Section L because they want to know what their what are the compliance nature of this proposal. Contracting manager has a tendency to run directly to the capture manager. Once runs to Section M. Section M has my evaluation criteria. I'm a techie. Okay, what do you think the first thing I do? I run to Section C. That's a task. That's the fun stuff. Okay, so I want to look for the statement of work, performance work statement, statement of objectives. Sometimes it can come as an attachment. Okay, but it's funny how based on what your job description is, that's what you do. I want to share something with you, and I want to make this clear. I have responded to a solicitation based on being compliant to Section C. Got DQ'd. Okay, right? Why did I get DQ'd? Because really compliance is laid out in Section L. But I hit all the tasking in Section C. I did everything they asked me to do. I kept my fonts. I kept on. No, Section L is going to have something else in it. Section L is going to tell you how to organize your response. Okay, so be very, very cautious. When in doubt, Section L. Just remember that. When in doubt, Section L. Go back to Section L. Take a look at it. It will tell you. It'll tell you how this is to be even formatted and to be organized. Okay, so yeah, I made that mistake once. I never make the mistake again. Evaluation criteria. Section B is your pricing instructions. Okay, typically they give you tables. Okay, those tables really should be populated by a spreadsheet. Get real smart and put your spreadsheet together, and then just copy those tables over, and they should go right in. Section J is all your attachments. Okay, we kind of get that. And Section H is important. Section H are special requirements. What you're going to see in Section H is your key personnel requirements, security requirements, OCI.
Excuse me.
Yes.
We're seeing your calendar on the screen. We supposed to be seeing your calendar, sir?
No, you're not supposed to be seeing my calendar.
Thank you.
I do apologize for that.
No problem.
Outlook came down, came back up again, and it just popped into that screen. I do apologize. So, okay. So anyway, uniform contract format. Okay, it's spelled out in FAR 15-204. Another thing, if you're working with your GSA schedules don't necessarily require this. Okay, so typically schedule doesn't fall under 15-204 uniform contract format, but they do have a number system or letter system, and they kind of align. So you should be able to see what the evaluation criteria is. Search, say, what's the criteria? Evaluation criteria, and it should be able to pop up. Okay, so that's important. Remember, when in doubt, Section L. When in doubt, Section L. When you're looking at the RFP documents. All right. So what I want to do is look at one more slide, real quick here, and so get prepared for these innovative solicitations. Okay, and I'm going to start right up at the top with oral presentations. Okay, if you saw my calendar, you saw I had all this time blocked out for oral coaching. That's one of the things that I do. Okay. Look, FAR 15-102, and I'm going to paraphrase it. I'm not going to try to quote it, but I guarantee I'm dead on with this thing. FAR 15-102 states this: anything other than pricing can be done with orals. Okay. Ooh, think about it. Okay. A couple things you got to learn with it, especially when we're coaching orals. I can do, and we start moving into, we're seeing more and more of these phase solicitations. Okay. And so we go into the phase solicitation. We'll talk a little bit about that in a second, because that's the next half of that slide. But the idea says I can do my corporate experience in an oral presentation. Get there and do a 20-minute slide presentation on my corporate experience. I didn't say past performance. I said corporate experience. Okay. And what they'll do after that, they'll do some sort of an advisory down select. Okay. And it's key that I said advisory down selects. Okay. Because Typically, whenever there's a down select, if it's a firm down select, that's when the protests hit. Okay. So typically they do an advisory down select. They say, look, really, honestly, we don't think you've got the experience to be able to be successful with this project. Now, large businesses have learned this. Small businesses are learning this. If I'm told that it doesn't look like I'm going to make it through, why in the world am I going to spend the money? Okay. And this has really been really good for business and for government too, is to be able to leverage oral presentations as much as possible. Okay. Another thing about oral presentations is there are a lot of rules that are around it. Okay. Number one, if you submit your deck, you can't change your deck by the time you're giving your orals. Okay. We all know that. Remember too that orals, they're going to be recorded. Oral presentations are binding. So what comes out of your mouth is binding. So you got to be really careful how you respond to certain clarification questions and things like that. If you're sticking to a script, you should be okay. It's during a Q&A period that you need to be practiced. Okay. The next thing is product demonstrations. They're looking more and more at product demonstrations. I can tell you a story about that, where the idea is that the incumbent had a particular type of device. Okay, it was a handheld device, and this was actually for Customs and Border Patrol. And they just thought they had it because the requirements or the specifications for what the government was looking for matched perfectly. They didn't do anything about it. Okay, well, somebody came in with a smaller device that met all the requirements. All right, we have more female agents in the field right now as CBP agents, as officers. And what this was one was big and clunky, one was a little bit easier to manage. Okay, so through the product demonstration, CBP selected the challenger. Let's just call it that way. Okay. Well, guess what? The incumbent protested. GAO threw it out. Said no way. They met all the requirements, and these are the reasons why they were selected. Okay. So product demonstrations are going to be important. Show me how you solve my problem. Technical challenges. We're seeing lots of these. Technical challenges and oral presentations are kind of running in the same format. Let me give you one more key secret about oral presentations. The customer is not looking at your technical response. They got it already. They know it. You submitted it. You submitted your deck with it. Okay. So what are orals really about? Orals are really about, and I learned this from a GSA SES 1102, and he said, Mike, the most important compelling component of your orals is your bid PM. Okay, that project manager, that program manager is the most critical component, because what the government's trying to do is, can I work with that person? And your key personnel, they want to know, can I trust my program with that key personnel? They're going to look and say, how well does the management work with their key personnel, their technical staff? How well do they work together? Can they work with us? These are all the intangibles that orals and basically technical challenges have the same quality. They're looking for, if you've ever been in a technical challenge and you had to do an agile thing, basically get an MVP up in the cloud, in 5 hours. Okay. What they're looking at is they're looking at, how does that team work together? These are the things you have to think about when you're going into oral presentations. Okay. And now we're seeing where the government, and the FAR is encouraging more and more orals. Get prepared. You're going to be in front of the customer a little bit more. Okay. I'm talking fast because I want to get this slide done so we have time for questions. I'm doing pretty good. Arlinda, I'm doing better than I did last time, that's for sure. Okay, here we go.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we talked about down selects. Okay, down selects are important. Difference between an advisory and a firm down select. Again, we're moving more to advisories because we as an industry got to get smarter. Okay, if I get an advisory down select, that basically is telling me the government is not interested in my approach. Phase solicitations are very important because what it does, and watch what it does for the government. They go through an RFI, they go through a source of select, they put out RFP. This is my first phase. What they're doing is they're building their funnel. They're slowly weeding out till we get 3 good solutions that we can begin to evaluate. So we're going to see more and more phase procurements coming out there. There's the most advantaged comparative evaluations. That's where they put everything up on a wall. I always tease my wife when we make pizza and we're putting the pepperoni in pizza. I say, do the squint test. Okay. You do the squint test, you go like this, and the blur kind of shows you where you've got your pepperoni. Anybody ever tells you if I said that, I'm going to deny it, but it's the squint test. They put it up on the board, everything's marked in greens or whatever, and then they basically do the squint test and say, what vendor had the most green? What vendor had the most red? That's just an example of what I'm talking about. So most events of comparative evaluations, best suited to negotiate. Oh man, this is cool. Okay. They don't make the award, but they might come up to you and say, we really liked your solution. Okay. But in the SLAs, you only were willing to stand up to 93%. Would you be willing to, at the same price, step up to 97%? You got to make a choice at that point in time. If you say no, that's too risky, they never award it to you, they go on to the next person. Okay. So it's best suited, then negotiate. If you can't negotiate, then you go on. On the spot consensus, real quick, and we're going to wrap it up here. On the spot consensus. If you get done with your orals, they might go in the back and score you right there. Okay. So the consensus is right there. Okay. Confidence rating versus objectival. Okay. This lets you have a little bit more subjectivity in their evaluations. They're doing more and more of that. That's about building confidence. Think about it. If it's confidence rating, you've got to convince them. You've got to build confidence. And guess what, guys? All these creative solicitations, all these ways of getting this information and running these acquisitions and being creative in how you're going to get demonstration and will it down to the best solution. Okay, is all supported in the FAR. Everybody gets so frustrated with the FAR won't let me do this. The FAR won't let me do that. The FAR will let you do an awful lot. Just get creative in the boundaries, okay? And we as industry, we need to begin to recognize these things. Because if we recognize how much agility the 1102 workforce has, guess what? We can be agile too in how we respond, okay? So with that, guys, I hope that helps get a picture of the types of documents, where they fit in the process, how does business development fit with the acquisition life cycle, okay? Where are your opportunities within that life cycle? It makes sense. It's not just magic. It makes sense if you understand how the process works. Okay. And with that, I'll stop and I'll stop sharing. And any questions, I am here to ask. I did not see these questions, so we'll go through these. Oh, Tim asked a great question. It says, how important is it to have a kickoff meeting when awarding a new contract? Okay. It's your first date. it's time to make a good impression. Okay. Remember I said that you can win or lose your recompete that first day. Okay. And I really think the kickoff meeting is important because then you lay out, and I'll say this too. Okay. Any government person that's on here, this is important. Okay. Tom Poise will tell you this when he teaches the service delivery. Read the contract. Read your contract. Make sure you understand what you're required to provide, and the government needs to understand what you are required to provide. So make sure you sit down and you read the contract, go through anything that might be questionable, ask questions. Hey, look, transition is going to look like this. Guess what? I can get transition done in 60 days, not 90 days, if you allow us to do this. That's good dialogue at the beginning of the contract. Okay. Can you talk a bit more about the difference between RFIs and source selections? How to count? Okay. All right. So remember, RFIs is can I do? Well, yeah. Do I have the ability to do? Okay. This is what I tell my small businesses. Respond to every RFI that you can. Okay. Remember to do market research. If a source selection document, if a source of sought notifications comes out after that, okay, and you see that, you probably hit that pool of I can do this. Another thing that happens in SSNs, okay, is this is where teaming sometimes gets exposed. All right. You ever been on a procurement where an RFI was responded to and they listed everybody who responded to the RFI? Okay. Well, and all of a sudden you find out, well, you know what? I can do 1/3 of this and I can team up with these people to be able to do it. So teaming, you get exposed to teaming opportunities when you respond to RFIs. It's important. Another thing about RFIs, remember, is that they can do a email solicitation, and they may only send out that solicitation to the folks who responded to the RFI. Don't assume you're going to be able to participate in the solicitation, that particular acquisition, if you didn't respond to the RFI, because they may only send the solicitation out to those who responded. Okay. Help us determine how these webinars are meeting your expectations. Oh, that's not for me. Sorry. I'm a slow reader. Okay. GSA eBuy, the menu only uses RFQ. Okay. I can't answer that, okay, but eBuy has a tendency to deal with so you got solicitations, you've got scheduled deals, you've got GSA, GWAC deals. Many times those are going to be well defined. Okay, the requirements going to be well defined, and they typically will come out as an RFQ. That's not the only answer. That's the only answer I can think of at this moment.
Hi, Mike Rice. This is Ruth Starr from GSA. Can you hear me?
Hi, Ruth. How you doing? Long time no see.
It's been a while, and my experience has been on small business participation and subcontracting. So if you have a contractor that has several small business subcontractors and you bid that and win it, what happens if one of the small businesses can't provide the subject matter experts that you had bid? Do you have an option to replace that person, or does the contractor have to rebid for the replacement company?
Okay. Has the contract been already awarded? Is that what you're saying? Okay.
Yes.
So typically the government says that your key personnel need to be committed to for at least a year, whatever the boundary is. Okay. And wait a minute. I'm sorry. Let me do this again. I'll bring this up. I'm gonna share my screen one more time so that's up. Okay. There's always a mechanism. If you look at me, I'm looking sideways. I'm actually looking at you guys, but I'm looking over here in another box. The mechanism is always there to replace your key personnel. Okay. And here this is where we find it happen most of the time. Let's say, how many of us have worked on solicitations that took a year to award? We submitted and we're still waiting for the award. Okay. So sometimes what ends up happening at that point is that the government's going to be reasonable and say, look, we took a year to reward this contract. I can't guarantee that person is going to be around in that period of time. So there is a mechanism, and typically the mechanism says that your alternate key personnel, wherever you submit, has got to meet the requirements, the same requirements of the solicitation. Does that help? You're on
Yeah,
mute.
that's fine for me. Yeah, it clears up a lot of things that I've been watching and seeing happen, because it takes so long to get through a solicitation and get it awarded, and then people leave and go to work at other companies, and you see people floating around because they need a job, they need to get paid. Okay, thank you.
And I can't sit there. I'm the bid PM, and I can't sit there and wait for a year for you to make that award. If an opportunity pops up, honestly, the government's they are good about that. They really are good about that. What they want to try to avoid, and that's why this is put in place, is you put these superstars in and you replace them all by the time you make the award. Does that make sense? It's like, it's the same thing with orals. Orals have got to be your bid PM and your key personnel. They used to hire professional actors to do orals. Well, if help me here. If the core reason for orals is for me to get to know the management team, the people going to be running this program, then I can't do that with actors. You see what I'm saying? So there's those intangibles that happen in the process. I chased that rabbit, Ruth. I'm sorry, but the idea is that they're pretty reasonable these days, especially when things take a long time. Okay. I'm trying to read. What GSA? Okay. All right, so GSA systems that are available. Okay, so if you've got a schedule, eBuy will always have anything that runs schedule or GSA. Okay, Assist, which is the FedSim. It's the assisted acquisitions people. Okay, FedSim has the Assist platform, and that has all the old regional systems in it, and then some of the national systems that are in there too. So those are two that you can look at right away. Okay, those are for source selection requires response through GSA. Oh, wait a minute. I don't want to skip past somebody. Hold on. I've started a new job as a task order manager for an SQVOSB. Your teacher. Oh, thank you. I'm sorry. I read slow. Thank you. I appreciate the compliment. For source selection notification that requires response through GSA portal, do you recommend responding always with a capability statement, even though it's optional? Okay. Oh, okay. So one of the things we try to discourage is if it's an RFI, they're going to look for capabilities. Okay. Sources sought, yes, they may look for capabilities. If you ever get in front of the customer, don't go in and give a capabilities pitch. Okay. At that point in time, you don't need to be talking about capabilities. You need to be talking about solutions. Okay. So if there's a solution, I would say this: if you have a solution for that particular problem that's been spelled out in the source of SALT, send them the solution, not your company capabilities. Okay. The question came up as, do you recommend responding even though we do not meet all the requirements, both PWS capabilities and questions? Wow. If you're looking to get on a team, you can support 50% of it, sure, respond. Okay. Because as a list, you'll be able to see who else is out there. You'll be able, your business development people can begin to reach out. We call it the BD dance. You reach out, start talking to people, and then seeing if you can put a team together. I would see that more in an R5 mode, not necessarily in a source of SALT mode. It's source of SALT, if you respond, you might be able to respond as a team. That's ultimately what you're trying to do. So the RFI goes out, you get a list who responded to the RFI, find a good team member out there, especially if you know if you're lacking in some of the response. Remember I told you about the Swiss cheese? You putting a team together puts cheese in the holes. That's what we can think about. They want a solution, a full solution. So that's what you use it for. Okay. I'm at 158 Arlinda. I don't see any more traffic coming up. Robert, you got my contact information. Can I put up real quick for you guys?
Yes, please.
There's my contact information. Okay. And the only plug I'm allowed to plug, and if you guys saw my video released on LinkedIn, is that this is just a piece of what we teach. Okay. And that's at the Schar School of Policy and Government. That's my contact information, folks. Please feel free to reach out to me at any time. I want you to know that my business partner, crime, is Gloria Parker. Those who know Gloria know that she is incredible depth in how to do this win business. Her book, The $1 Billion Secret, is out, and then Tom Boyce, he's another one of our top guys as far as service delivery. So please feel free to reach out anytime. Okay.
Mike, I did neglect to mention your book, but please, you can reference your book now just to let people know about your book.
Okay. All right, let me bring out my picture again. I'm gonna get an old copy. So, folks, I've actually worked on a couple of books. All right, if you look at my link for my Amazon link, that takes you right to my Amazon page. This book was the first book I did, called In Pursuit of Business Development Lifecycle. And what I showed you up at the top, how the life cycle works and how it works together, it's all in this book. Okay. And I can tell you this, and I say this with all confidence, we teach Fortune 100s, we teach a Fortune 10, okay? And the Fortune 10 took Gloria's book, my book, and basically are realigning their whole capture practices based on what we taught their people. So, and they bought our books for all their business development books, okay? All right. Thank you for that, Arlinda. I never get a chance to show off my book. So,
no, you're welcome. And I thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. I learned a lot, and also, even though I've heard some of it before, it's always good to hear it again. I hope that everyone who is online feels the same way, and I'm sure they did. I'm sure everyone who joined us today got something valuable out of today's presentation. And also about teasing you about last time. I know it's just that you're passionate and you want to get so much information out there. And actually, in that sense or that vein, we really, really appreciate it.